How are we doing, Kansas Jayhawks fans? This is your host, Nick Rondeau, bringing at you some Jayhawks Daily content. And we had an exciting weekend. We definitely had, a very fun event, late night in the fog, that we're going to be breaking down. But, this is the first real taste of Kansas basketball for this upcoming season. It's for the players, a lot of times, the first taste. A lot of them was a first time experience for them, for the fans to be able to see what their team's going to look like this season, including one Darren Peterson, hoping how he's going to look out for his one and only season for the Jayhawks. And we're really excited. We're gonna talk about a lot of stuff that kind of unraveled and folded from the late night in the fog event on Friday night, but it was a lot to unpack, I would say. But first I just got to say I think it was overall very, very big success. You saw the energy, you saw how exciting it was. People were saying it wasn't as full, but as the night got more progressing along, filled up a lot more. But if anything, yes, maybe the fact that there was no big name rapper or other performer, maybe that hurt the attendance slightly. But it's not all about the attendance. It's about seeing the team, seeing how they're playing, and kind of just, this isn't, like Bill Self even said, this isn't their number one recruiting event anymore. They've got, Kansas football games to go to. Kansas City Chiefs are 40 miles away. Who knows if they want to go there. But there's plenty of environment that shows that Kansas is a great place to play. And we got exhibition games coming up. That'll be good. One of the Louisville game is at Louisville, but we've got at least a couple of experiences and some early on tastes of what this Kansas team's going to look like next year, and not bad. I'm excited. I think it's going to be an interesting. It's going to be maybe a little bumpy road at the beginning, but we're just going to be seeing exactly what Bill Self and this team's given us, and we got to take it. We're 19 right now. They're not number one on the spotlight anymore like the past two seasons. So at this point, all they can do is really surprise us. They can't let us down like the last 2 years where all they did was went down. We can still go up. But no, it was very interesting. I loved a lot of the skits and videos they did. I swear, Bill Self, maybe if he does retire at some point, he could really go into acting because he's got some good acting chops. But it was funny. They had a time portal through the fog type time portal thing, and of course they used the portal, not time machine, because that's more of a triggering word these days. But he put in his 5 rings. He went back in time and recruited Wilt Chamberlain. It was Flory Badunga and Danny Manning. Darren Peterson saying exactly how he's got to stay 4 years. He's going to win the national championship. He's going to score this many points. A bunch of former Paul Pierce, Jeremy Case played himself, Claude Lovelet. I mean, it was definitely a funny skit seeing Bill kind of in his element in all these funky costumes, and seeing the guys play the older Kansas legends. This is a fun group. I like how they're keeping it, fresh. I like the social media, content that they're doing. They're really pushing stuff out to get people to buy in and kind of stay interested. I think it's fun. Who wouldn't have wanted to see the Morris twins back in some of those skits? And speaking of the Morris twins, they were at late night in the fog. There were a couple other Jayhawks there as well. Zeke Mayo, he made a half court shot for a fan, and he also, I think, got signed by the Cavs on that same day, or within a couple of days. But an interesting one was Hunter Dickinson was there, and he got booed. He got booed, and I'm smiling, but I mean that's one. He was a fine player for Kansas. We didn't succeed at the level that we wanted to during his tenure, but booing a former player who gave good 3-4 years there, I don't condone that. That is a bad sports town vibe. But I will say, it's authentic. It comes out that way, and you've heard from things that I say on. I was very upset with his tenure at Kansas as well. I could understand the harsh emotions to a booing of that man, but it is disappointing, obviously, and especially for him because now he's probably not going to have many more trips there or give much more of an effort. But the thing is also you look at it that way. A lot of those were the students that had to watch him over the past couple seasons, at least a few of them. So it's going to be different compared to a couple of the other legends that have seen what Hunter Dickinson has contributed, which is some great performances, but yes, disappointing tenure overall just because he was the focal point. But, it was a great event. That was a blip on the radar for that entire event. The scrimmage went off pretty well. A tight game, I would say. I think it was ended 27-23 or something along those lines. Looked very loose, very limber. But what are we really taking away from that? And is the three ball going to kill us again? And they went 2 for 15 combined as both teams. Only ones were made by Jamari McDowell and Corbin Allen. So not expected contributors per se on the starting lineup. And Darren Peterson went 0 for 4, Trey White 0 for 2, Cole Rosario 0 for 2, Bryson Tiller 0 for 2. I mean, it's disappointing because we saw what this team can do, or more presently can't do when they are not hitting the 3-point ball, and it's means they're going to be ugly games. They're going to be scoring 60-something points, low 60s. Hard defense, which this team has that capability. They are a very effective defensive unit. They have I would say that would probably be their identity early on, but we will not be able to thrive and live through this entire season if we're shooting this poorly. And, I don't see this as a long-term, last year it was damning when they did shoot so poorly in late night in the fog. Kind of was that way for the season. Only guys were shooting over 34% last year were David Coet and Zeke Mayo, of course. Only guys coming into this KU team that was shooting over 34% last year was Jaden Dawson. Trey White just under at that 32 last year for him. He's a 30% career three-point shooter, but only on 2 attempts a game. So that's going to have to go up. I see G. Ngala. I see him as similar to like a David Coet. He was a 35% shooter from 3. I see that, being a similar expectation to get out of him. And Darren Peterson's the biggest question mark. I mean, he has an effective 3-point shot. He should be making more threes. This is barely an exhibition. It's a scrimmage. I'm not taking this to heart of how it's going to affect his scoring, but we do know that we're going to need some pretty effective 3-point scoring. Obviously Darren Peterson's going to create shots by driving and kicking out on when he gets doubled or he gets collapsed in the paint. There are going to be plenty of opportunities. This is not a quick overreaction, but we have to be cognizant of it because it has killed us in the years past, and we cannot have it take us down again. We need to be able to shoot the 3-ball effectively. I mean, Cole Rosario, I think he will be shooting the ball effectively. He has that ability, but again, he hasn't done it consistently. Even in high school, he was shooting 29 or 26% at the OTE, and it was just, he was going volume. He was being an effective shooter, but I think, shot selection is kind of what we're looking at, and even Bill Self spoke about it afterwards. He liked the shot selection. He thought that, they were fine shots. It's a scrimmage. Let's not overreact. At the end of the day, Darren Peterson's still going to be scoring 20-something. However many of those are threes, we'll take those. But the rest of the guys will be producing, and people are wondering, who's going to take that 5th starting spot. Kind of, is it going to be a more 3-point-oriented player like a Jaden Dawson, or are we going to go athletic and try to, play on that defensive or, cutting side like an El Marco or, maybe even a Cole Rosario who's got the potential for both. I don't know. I don't see Cole Rosario getting the start early on. It just seems too difficult for a guy who reclassified late last year and then jump in the starting lineup. Too rich for my blood. I'd say, take it, slow and steady with El Marco just to start. Who knows? Go running for 4 minutes, and then we'll get some quick subs going. I love the depth that we have this year, and that's what Bill loves too. He's even mentioned it. So I'm definitely excited, that they've got that going for them. I even forgot to mention they did one more, skit scrimmage thing. It was hilarious, I thought, was a Hoops Island spoof, kind of on Love Island, and all of them were selling themselves to Bill Self to make the team. And, it was interesting. G and Gala had a hilarious one. I'm from Canada, so I'm sweet as maple syrup, and just funny, on entendres to get that on. But the vibes of this team are good. I think they're close. I think they're fun, and that's what's going to really prevail is a kind of a brotherhood. Like even when people were coming back from that 22 season, some of the interviews Jalen Wilson and those guys were talking about, it was just saying, I feel like they would never want to get beat because they were all best friends. They were all so close. They were a brotherhood, and that's kind of what it takes to win is fully believing in one another to pick up where you're leaving off, help for mistakes, always be in the right positions. That's what's going to be. And, this team, it's giving me a lot closer to those vibes than maybe in the years past where we're having some, yelling matches and screaming matches about who's supposed to be where and who's messing up defensively. But we'll see how it goes. And that kind of brings me into my next point, which is, I saw this in the comments before. Who's going to be redshirting? Are we going to? And Bill did mention it. He said we won't be making those decisions until after the exhibition games and before the season. The rule is difficult. You can't play any games. It's frustrating, but that's what it's going to be. And people are all pointing towards one person for that, and that would be Corbin Allen. And I think that's just a mistake. I think it's not smart to redshirt a guy. I think people are in the comments are even kind of echoing that point. I don't see a reason to redshirt him. Yes, medical redshirt makes a 100% sense, but no one's in that position. I don't think Corbin Allen needs to develop that much. He could, it's not going to harm him, but I just think about the depth of this team, and it's better to have that depth. Past that point, you've got Melvin starting, you've got G coming off the bench. Corbin Allen's a fine other wing or guard to, play in there. Who knows what's going to happen? And I just think redshirts, he was one of the only guys to make a three-pointer. He was a four-time, I believe, All-American in Kansas. He seemed like, for late in the fog, it seemed like he was taking it in the most almost, being a hometown kind of kid. He seemed like he really enjoyed it, and he excelled. He had a steal, a three-pointer, played in 6 minutes. Good for him. I think he could be a great contributor. One of his biggest advocates is Sharon Collins. He's saying he's going to be a contributor. He's going to help us out. Sure, he's only a 3-star right now, but just because you're a 3-star doesn't mean you're not ready to contribute to the team right now. So I think he'll have some success, hopefully, but he'll definitely, that he's the one I would say closest to on the chopping block that makes sense based on, kind of where he is in the team, his grade, and potential outlook, given how, I don't want to say stacked, but maybe loaded this team could be. But I just think it would be a terrible mistake to redshirt him just because of projected depth, because who knows what happens. I mean, we remember when McCullough was out for, weeks at a time. You need a guy to be able to come off the bench, and we had nothing. We had nothing to, answer that bell, but I at least love our depth. Jamar McDowell, speaking of our depth, I've gone into him about a breakout bench player. He had an excellent performance, 5 points, a couple of great layups. I think we're going to get a lot more spark off the bench this year than we have in years past, and that can only help us, definitely not hurt us. So I think Corbin Allen would be a little bit of a mistake to do that. But last up, we just want to talk a little bit about what's been swirling around and what we've talked about, and it's Bill Self, and it's, is he on retirement watch? An analyst, Jeff Borzella, said, keep a lookout for him as, he's getting to be one of the older coaches in, not only the Big 12, but in college basketball. And a lot of those guys have stepped down over the past couple of years. Bruce Pearl most recently, Tony Bennett, Jim Larinaga, Jim Boeheim. It's just frustrating to hear these kind of rumors swirling and think we might be losing Bill Self, and it's only frustrating because he's such a good coach. And I'm not going to have it for whoever was circulating videos of, the late night in the fog early on possessions of, pass and screen away, and isolation scoring. It's a scrimmage, people. He's going to call some plays. He's going to have his fun. And Bill Self is an excellent offensive-minded, scripting up plays. I'm never going to go against him for the X's and O's. Now he's got, other, head coaching talent in Jacques Vaughn to help him out, perform at that level. But I'm not going to have it that he is, stale as an offensive coach or even defense. Like, he isn't a great coach. The only thing I can't, turn my head away from is he's getting a lot older, and he may not want to be coaching that long. And he's made it very clear. He said he used to, look at his tenure as, 5-year increments. And how would he look every 5 years? And he said now that's probably like 2 or 3 year increments. And, he knows he's not on the front nine anymore. If he's playing golf, he's not on the front nine. He's on the back nine. He's like, I'm either on 13 or 16, but he knows he's not done. He's not on that 18th hole yet. So, people are also, again, what his recent promotion of Jeremy Case. He's the first ever associate head coach under Bill Self in his tenure. He said he's going to make a great head coach somewhere, but he didn't say at Kansas. And maybe he is. Maybe that's the the writing underneath the scripture right there that he is going to be that next head coach. I don't know, but I it'd be sad to see Bill Self go anytime in the next couple of years. He's got the number one pick for the NBA going up in this team with some great returning talent and great talent coming in. He's got the number 2 recruiting class as of right now going into next season. I don't see why he would leave based on obviously health reasons. Health comes first. We love Bill Self. Do whatever you can for yourself, but we would miss you too much, and this team would definitely struggle in its first or second season. And I'm not going to take 2 bad seasons or 2 poorer seasons to kick Bill Self out yet. That is not who we are. That is the Hunter Dickinson booing that we're showing, and that is wrong, as Bill Self deserves the utmost respect. So we'll see how it all shakes out, but yes, he's older. Yes, he's still great, and yes, this Kansas Jayhawks team will be great. But we'll know. Green Bay, Doug Gottlieb will know when that happens. We'll know UNC and Hubert Davis when that happens. We are weeks away from tip-off. I am so excited, and I appreciate you guys for listening and watching. Thank you so much. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and rock chalk. Go Jayhawks.